Once again, supporters of Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr occupy Iraq's parliament. But this time they vow to stay put until their demands are met.
We reject corruption and corrupt politicians. Sudan is a tool in the hands of foreign powers. He and his colleagues work against Iraq. He won't do anything for our benefit.
We won't leave until we kick those corrupt politicians out of Iraq.
A pro-Iranian bloc called the Coordination Framework has nominated Mohammed Shia al-Sudani for Prime Minister. These protesters have linked him to former Premier Nouri al-Maliki.
Despite calls for calm by many officials, including Sadr, who instructed his supporters to refrain from violence, the protesters were far from peaceful.
The Health Ministry has confirmed dozens of people, including soldiers, were injured when police fired tear gas at the crowds.
Everyone shares the responsibility: political parties, the political elite, social forces and influential figures. We have to say it to everyone, and everyone must act wisely, with Iraq in mind, in order not to lose again.
Saturday's parliamentary session had been dedicated to electing a new president, followed by the naming of a prime minister, who would then form a new government. All that is now on hold, giving rival politicians a chance to meet. But these protesters are worried that MPs could hold an unannounced session to approve Sudani. So now they're in for the long haul. Mahmoud Abdul Wahid, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.
Well, the influential Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr won the most support in elections in October last year, but has not been able to form a government that excludes Shia rivals who support Iran. Now, last month, Sadr withdrew his lawmakers from parliament after competing factions failed to agree on the composition of a new government. And that's been fueling this ongoing power struggle with rival political groups that are more closely aligned to Iran. Protesters in parliament have chanted against Sadr's rivals, his adversaries, after Iran-backed parties veteran Shia politician and ex-cabinet minister Mohammed al-Sudani was nominated to the position of prime minister. So Dosa Jabari joins us from Baghdad, and I suppose many questions on people's minds tonight: how long this sit-in is going to last, and whether the Sadr could be preparing for some sort of street fight.
Certainly, that is the #1 concern, and I think that is why we heard from the current Prime Minister, Mustafa al-Kadhimi, urging all sides to show restraint to try and prevent that from happening, because as you know, Maryam, many of the different factions in Iraq are armed, and they also have armed groups that are affiliated with them. So any kind of a serious escalation would plunge this country into possibly a civil war, which is what everyone's trying to avoid. What they're hoping this will achieve is force the sides to sit at the table and try to come to some kind of a agreement. I think the thing we're hearing now the most is that how people are not satisfied with the overall structure of how this country is governed. And that goes back to the year 2005, after the fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003. There was a referendum put to the people of Iraq about a constitution that they would accept, and they did overwhelmingly accept a constitution that saw a parliamentary system of government come into being. And as a result of that, they now have a prime minister and president appointed through a parliament, and they vote for parties rather than the actual person. And I think at the core of that, we see all the problems that it's created, because you have different divisions within the different parties as well, and the rivals within certain groups. It doesn't matter their religious affiliation. I think the divisions are now very much highlighted in Iraq as a result of Muqtada al-Sadr and his decision to leave the political sphere for the moment, because he said that he doesn't want to take part in a process that is full of corruption. In terms of the protesters, they're hoping their sit-in in Parliament will delay any kind of a vote and inevitably force the interested parties to sit at a table and come to some kind of an agreement. The longer that takes, of course, the more dangerous the situation becomes.
And we have seen this many times over the years, this struggle to form a government after elections take place. And we've seen these crises can be drawn out over many, many months. But is there now a fear that the system might have reached some sort of tipping point that will have to encourage some sort of deeper structural change because it's simply not sustainable to continue like this?
Certainly, this is the longest this country has gone without a functioning government. And even though they had elections in October last year, they were not able to form any kind of a government to oversee how they spend the country's revenues. They have not had a budget for 2022, and there is a lot of money that is pouring into this country as a result of their oil sales. And of course, oil prices being at all-time highs over the past few months, the revenues this country has grown as well. But they need to spend that money on the much-needed infrastructure. There are still power outages on a daily basis in Baghdad. There is a shortage of medicine for people that really need it. It's unemployment is at an all-time high. So there really needs to be a systematic change. And what we're hearing now is possibly a move to having some kind of a referendum as to whether or not they want to continue with this parliamentary system. If that is the case, then there could be possibility of fundamental change in how this country is run. But whether or not all the sides can agree to that, and also the other countries that are very much interested in what happens here, whether or not they will stand by and allow that to happen remains to be seen. But certainly, I think what is clear now is the system that they have is not working, regardless of how many elections they have. So there's hope and there's optimism that these actions will actually lead to some kind of long-term change.
Very important point you make there, Dursa, about how this ongoing paralysis affects the obligation the government has to deliver